If you're trying to choose between P&O Cruises, Iona and Arvia, it can feel like a really difficult decision, because on paper, these two ships look almost identical. They carry a similar number of passengers, and they offer a very similar mix of dining, entertainment, and onboard experiences, so it's easy to assume there isn't much between them. But having sailed on both, I can tell you that once you're actually on board, they don't feel the same at all. On paper, Iona and Arvia are incredibly similar ships, but they were designed with slightly different types of cruising in mind, and that's where everything starts to change. Iona was built more for cooler climates, so itineraries like Norway, Northern Europe, and winter sailings where the weather can be unpredictable, and that's why the Skydome is fully enclosed. It gives you a large, reliable space that works whatever the weather is doing, and it becomes a central hub of the ship that people use throughout the day, whether that's for swimming, relaxing, or watching entertainment in the evening. Arvia, on the other hand, was designed more with warm weather cruising in mind, particularly the Mediterranean and the Caribbean, and that's why the Skydome has a retractable roof. With the roof closed, it works much like Iona's, but when it opens, it becomes a proper outdoor space, which works much better in warm weather. So if that flexibility matters to you, Arvia is the better choice. When it comes to cabins, this is where Iona and Arvia are almost identical, and there really isn't much to separate them. The layouts are the same, the storage works in a very similar way, and the bathrooms feel almost identical, so if you've stayed on one, the other will feel very familiar straight away. Since Iona's refit, that gap has become even smaller, so you're not really choosing between an older and newer feel anymore. And that's why cabins aren't the deciding factor here, because whichever ship you choose, you're going to get a very similar experience in your cabin. The real differences come once you step outside and start using the ship when it's busy, and that's where things start to change quite quickly. Dining is where you really start to notice the difference between these two ships, and it's one of the areas that will affect your day-to-day experience the most. On Iona, you've got 4 main dining rooms: Pearl, Coral, Aqua, and Opal, plus the Olive Grove, which is a separate Mediterranean restaurant on Deck 8, rather than part of the main dining setup. On Arvia, that layout changes. You've got 2 main dining rooms, Meridian and Zenith, and the space where Aqua and Opal are on Iona has been reworked. That's where you'll now find venues like 6th Street Diner and the Olive Grove. Originally, the Olive Grove worked in a similar way to Iona, but it's now been adapted to sit alongside the main dining setup, with a smaller Mediterranean menu, helping to take some of the pressure off the main dining rooms. Green & Co., the plant-based specialty restaurant, is also positioned where the Olive Grove sits on Iona. So while the overall layout feels familiar, the way those spaces are used is quite different. Now, on paper, Arvia looks like it has more choice. You've got 6th Street Diner, Green & Co., and even differences in the quays, where the Boardwalk Diner on Iona has been replaced with the Roast Carvery Station. And that is true in terms of variety, but both ships still have over 30 dining venues in total. What really matters is how that works when the ship is full. On Iona, because there are 4 main dining rooms, demand is spread across more venues, so even at busy times it feels more manageable, and you can usually find somewhere to eat without too much waiting. On Arvia, with fewer main dining rooms, more people are trying to use the same spaces at the same time, and that's when you start to notice queues building, particularly on celebration nights, when most people want to dine at similar times. Even with the Olive Grove now supporting the main dining setup, you're still concentrating more people into fewer core venues. It's not that you can't get a table, because you can, but it takes more time, more waiting, and sometimes a bit more planning around when you eat. So while Arvia wins on variety, Iona often feels easier to use in practice when it comes to dining, and that's something that has a real impact on your overall experience. On ships the size of Iona and Arvia, how it flows really matters, because it affects how easy it is to move around and use different areas, especially when it's busy. And you don't want it to feel like 6,000 people are all heading to the same place at the same time. You're constantly moving between different parts of the ship throughout the day, and that's where layout starts to make a difference. On Arvia, because there are more destination-style venues and activity areas, the ship is designed to give you more to do throughout the day. A good example of that is on the top decks, where things like the altitude skywalk and mini golf take up space that on Iona is used more for sunbeds and open deck areas. So on Arvia, those spaces are more activity-led, which works well if you like a busier, resort-style feel, but it does mean there's less purely open space. On Iona, the layout is simpler and more open, and that makes it feel easier to move around without having to think about where to go next. Both ships are well designed and work well in practice, but Iona does edge it slightly when it comes to how easy the layout feels to use, particularly when the ship is busy. And one of the clearest examples of that is how each ship handles a sea day. What really matters, especially if you're looking at a cruise in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean with multiple sea days, is what those sea days are actually like on ships of this size. There's a very predictable pattern. Early morning, it's fairly quiet, but by mid-morning, the main deck areas start to fill up quickly, and on popular ships like these, people will get up early to secure a sunbed. It's not unusual to see towels out from 6 in the morning, especially on sea days. On Arvia, that pressure builds quite quickly. Areas like the infinity pool and the swim-up bar become extremely popular, and once those spaces are full, it becomes much harder to find somewhere in a good location without having to keep moving around. So you end up with a situation where people are either out early securing a spot, or spending time walking the decks trying to find one, and that's where the experience can start to feel a bit more effort than it should be. On Iona, although both cruises were in cooler weather, the layout gives a good sense of how the ship handles those busy periods, because there's more open deck space overall and more flexibility in where people can spread out. At the moment, Arvia is the ship that regularly sails the Caribbean, but from October 2027, Iona is also due to be based there for the winter season, so this comparison becomes much more relevant if you're looking at future Caribbean cruises. And when you look at it in that context, the decision becomes less about what each ship has on board, and more about how you want your time on board to feel. Because on a Caribbean cruise, the ship plays a much bigger role in your holiday. You spend more time on deck, so the choice becomes quite straightforward. Arvia gives you a more active, resort-style experience, with more going on around you throughout the day. Iona gives you a more straightforward, slightly more relaxed experience, where things feel a bit easier and less pressured over the course of a sea day. And that's really what you're choosing between here. Not which ship is better, but which one suits how you want to spend your time on board. Arvia definitely has more going on when it comes to activities, and that's one of its biggest selling points. But it's worth saying that the core entertainment across both ships is very similar. The headliners' theatre shows are the same, and you've got the same mix of venues and events. Things like quizzes in Brody's, films in Ocean Studios, silent discos and shows in the Sky Dome, as well as the casino and the clubhouse. Both ships also have the reef and scene for children and teens. So in terms of structured entertainment and what's included, there isn't a huge difference. Where Arvia pulls ahead is in the additional things to do. You've got mission control, the high ropes course, and mini golf, which adds variety and gives you more to do, especially if you're traveling with family. Now, mini golf is included, but things like the high ropes and mission control are extra cost, so it's worth factoring that in, because not everything on board is included in your fare. So the difference here isn't really about entertainment quality, it's about how much you want to do during your cruise. So the choice between Iona and Arvia really comes down to the type of cruise you're looking for. If you want a ship with more going on, more activities, and a livelier, resort-style feel, Arvia is the better choice. If you prefer something that feels easier to use, more straightforward, and a bit more relaxed across the course of a cruise, Iona is the better fit. Both ships work well, but they offer slightly different experiences, and that's what will ultimately decide which one suits you best. If you're leaning towards Iona, the next thing you'll want to see is what the ship actually looks like in practice, deck by deck, and how all of this comes together on board. So click on screen now for my full Iona ship tour, because that will give you a much clearer idea of whether it's the right ship for you.